Welcome. We had a big run. The last episode, I think we won the OHL title, maybe, and then we ended up losing in the Memorial. We got kind of smoked, 3-0. Or sorry, we lost all 3 games. And Red Deer won again. So Red Deer actually won back-to-back titles. If you look at Red Deer, they're actually one of the best little runs in junior hockey ever. Red Deer has 2 teams in a row that won the Memorial. So they I'm looking at mine. So yeah, if you see my little 3-year run, that was pretty insane. 3 OHL titles. The first year we won the Memorial, that 54-win team, and then we actually won more games. We were a little bit better team the next year, but lost in the final to Red Deer in the Memorial. We lost 3-2 in a really close game, and then we made it back to Memorial last year with 53 wins, swept the OHL finals, and played Red Deer in the first round. Lost big to them. They were just an insane team, and they ended up going on and winning it. We actually even lost to like a 31-win Niagara team in the second game. They were the host. It was 2 OHL teams, so we had a really bad Memorial Cup, 1-0-3, and then so yeah, that had a really dominant 3-year run of 50 plus wins, almost 4 years with the 46 there, and we went into the season and all we really had back was a couple really good OAs. We had the best of the rest kind of from that big draft class of 2013s, all the guys that were the same age. We just kept the guys that were the best guys that didn't get drafted. So we had like 15 really good players. So we kept kind of like 10, 11, like 12 type thing. Fournier, and we kept Fournier, Preda, and Baldoni, the defenseman, and the 2 centers. And so we were really had those 3 really good OAs. They're all about like 13 rated. I think 15 for a Preda, the center. So he just those Fournier and Preda, I think, just missed out getting drafted in the NHL. They just didn't have the quite good enough at the time and didn't get redrafted as 18, 19-year-olds. But so yeah, they started the season. They kind of carried us. We had them in Maynard, and so we had a winning record at the start of this year. At one point, we were as good as like 11-7, but I figured we just didn't have enough to win. We weren't good enough. We really desperately needed a rebuild. We were missing second round picks this year and next year, and so we're going to be really bad and then not have second round picks. And I could see a lot of stalemate years in the future of like 36 win teams, and the kind of had some PTSD of the second round playoff exits. So I decided it would probably be best to do a full out rebuild. I think the teams, unfortunately, in the new world of sports, that's kind of like the best path, even though it kind of sucks for the parity of the league. But so yeah, we're going to do that. It was just a kind of minor one, like a 1-year one, and we already kind of got a lot of our assets back. So we'll talk about that. But I really want to show you this Red Deer team. They're still good. That's the crazy thing. They're 29-8 the next year. So if you look at their history, yeah, they were really bad, and then got a couple really high picks, and then they got a really good import player, and then like the second pick of the draft, who ended up being the second pick of the NHL draft a couple years later. You'll see him in a second. And then they had so they won the Memorial with a 40-win season, and then they won the second Memorial with 57 wins, and it looks like the season again they're going to be really friggin' nasty. So they had this D. So this D killed me. He was actually 16 in their first Memorial Cup when they beat me in the really close 3-2 game. This guy's 6'5", beast. Like I said, I think he went second overall, first overall in the double WHL draft, second overall in the NHL draft. So that guy's an absolute bona fide superstar. And then this guy's even better. So this guy's crazy because this guy was actually a second round pick in the dub and only a second round pick in the NHL. But as you can see, he's just developed like crazy. And so he was like almost a 20 rated as like a 17-year-old. He was nuts. So that first Memorial Cup, he smoked me. And then last year, he was like their superstar player and scored a ton of goals. And yeah, so as you can see, he had 67. So if you look at his game scores, he's like an 80 guy. Yeah, 86 now. So he had as a 17-year-old, he has 73 game score, which is pretty sick. So he's a beast. And then it looks like they trade for this. Or no, yeah, they had this guy the whole time too. This guy was the third pick of the draft to start this whole build of superstar players. He is a freak, a 6'5" center that's 240 with 14 speed. So he's really good. And then they have this crazy defenseman who's really good. He was like their third right D last year. That's how loaded they were. So they got a lot of really sick players, and then they got another overage center that's really good, kind of like Fournier and Preda. Really good offense player, solid on defense now, pretty average, kind of good at the main category. So, anyways, they got really nasty, and I just want to show you their top player from last year. If you look, they actually had this guy too last year, who was insane, and then they had This guy was their best player. This guy was nuts. So they had this 19-year-old foreign defense guy. He was third pick of the CHL. So again, that was like their big. I've noticed a trend. It's not just getting the high pick guy in your own draft. It's when you get that super high pick, you get a high import pick. So that's kind of the key. So you get the 17-year-old import and you get the 16-year-old WHL or OHL drafted guy. So that was kind of their combo, is this guy and that 6'5" center I just showed you. And then they got kind of lucky by getting that really good second round winger. So that was kind of the key to their success. And then they had the third pick that year and they're bad again. And then they got that big defenseman, a 6'5" guy, like first overall. So that they kind of built their whole team around that third overall pick import, third overall pick WHL center, and then first overall pick defenseman. And so they were all within like a year or two of each other, and then they got that winger that was really good, and then they just kind of built around those guys and got some other key pieces. Like you got this really good center here, and then they got the right D, and then they got this left D who's pretty good. So if you, I always like to kind of pay attention to those teams that have the dominant runs and see how they kind of built it, and it's usually follows the same trend as they were totally rebuilding and they got those top 5 picks, and that's kind of the easy way out most of the time. But it seems to be in the game that kind of has been a trend that's happened for a while. This goalie looks insane too. So this guy was the 4th pick. So this would have been the last year they were bad. How did that happen? Yeah, I don't know how they got him. But yeah, so because the draft's year earlier in the WHL. So yeah, that would have been the last year they were bad before the Memorial. He would have been the rookie in that Memorial team, I guess. He's turning 18 maybe. Yeah, so anyways, however it worked. He would have been 15 that year, I guess. So he's another good player, 6'5" goalie they got. So they're probably going to stay good for a year or two because they'll have this guy again next year. And then they'll lose the top 2, but then they might even have this defense back. He'll probably make the NHL, but maybe not. So if they have him back and then the right D back, that gives them an insane D pair next year. And then they lose a lot of like that stuff though, and then they'll kind of be all the way down here. So yeah, they probably won't be too good. They'll won't be good at all if they lose this guy, but if they get this guy back, they'll have another playoff team. But yeah, so that's kind of how they built their dynasty. I thought that was pretty cool. But back to my team. I have totally rebuilt, and so if you look now, this is actually my team. I just made those trades like a couple days ago in the game. So my best player now are the 2 wingers, Razor, who actually played a little bit. Again, I was sticking to the rule of making, and it's kind of works out cool, sticking to the rule of having 2 16-year-olds minimum on your roster each year. So even those years I was loaded and stacked good 19-year-olds, I got a way to get Razor on the roster, and he didn't even have a point that year. Just rotate in the 4th line about 10 or 11 games. And then the following year, I had he only had 16 games, but he did have 7 points. Played a little bit. We had some major injuries or whatever, and on a pretty good team. And so he actually has 2 OHL titles, which is really cool. Doesn't say he has them because I don't think he dressed for them or whatever, but obviously like he'd have them being on those teams. And then this year he's taken over, jumped right to the first line because we're a rebuilding team. So he's almost at a point a game. He's only getting 13 minutes a game, which is interesting. I don't know why that is. I guess he's not in the power play, or he wasn't, but he is now. But so he'll jump up even more now that he's on the power play, even though it's a pretty bad team. He'll have a lot of chance to produce. And then Woody Little has been the big surprise the last couple of years. He is really cool. So he's a guy I took in the 6th round. But my scout actually had him as like the 20th best current player in that draft. I didn't have like a 2nd or 3rd rounder, so I like picked someone the 1st, and then I picked someone else I liked in like the 4th, and then by the time I rolled around to like my 3rd or 4th pick, I sorted by current and realized he was like way better than everybody, and didn't really have big potential, only like 2 stars, so I was like kind of missed him in that 4th round, but I looked, and he actually had really good current ratings, so I drafted him, and then he was 6'4", 160, but he just couldn't really skate. He had like 12 strength, though, but he couldn't skate at all. He had like 6 speed. So I figured he'd just be a guy that, like, if he got skating, he'd probably turn out pretty good. And so he gained a ton of improvement on like all across the board. And then the second year I signed him, and he was like 6'4", like grew all the way to like 200 pounds, and from like 165, and because he had really good strength, so I knew he'd fill out eventually. And then so he's on the team last year a little bit, played like 37 games. We had some injuries. That was the team that won the OHL final, and he played a lot as a 17-year-old. And then this year he's growing quite a bit, and again he's the same as Razor, almost a point a game, the same production, 32 points, 16 minutes a game. So he's a guy that is almost has peak already, but well, like my scout says, he could probably still get quite a bit better. He is 18 though, so that's fine. But he's gotten really good. His skating's gotten decent, so he's like an average skater now, and he has a really good offensive profile and some good defense. He's 6'5", so he's a guy that I taught both sides to. That's the trend you'll notice. So since I was really bad, I figured I'd just teach everybody like multiple positions, and that'll help, and probably help me kind of lose a few more games for the rebuild here. But he Yeah, he's really good. So I can actually play him on the left wing on 5-on-5, and then he's a guy that, since he knows the right wing, I can put him on the right wing in the power play. So you have that quick one-time shot. So I'll be really cool. So I'll put him in a position to get a lot of points next season if I don't trade him. So him and Razor are the main two now, and then I got Trafford is like my best player overall, probably, or my favorite player. He's the guy converted, and he just keeps going up and up, and he's getting really good. So he's up to like all green on offense almost, and that includes screening getting open, which is sweet because most defensemen, since he was a forward, most defensemen only have like 5 and 7 in those two categories. So he's a guy as a defenseman that can play up quite a bit and actually find a way to score a lot of goals. So I'm going to turn his shooting up a little bit and passing and make him my like main offensive guy on the D side. And I've actually tinkered with the idea of moving him forward because, funny enough, I think he would be my best player right now if I had him at forward or defense. So it doesn't really matter where he plays. I could put him at right wing with 16 positioning and that elite offense, not elite, but like really good offense and stuff. And yeah, he would be like my producer probably on as a forward if I got, because I'm getting pretty loaded on D, so I might end up doing that as like second or last year, depending, because he does have like 4 years to play still, 17, 18, 19, and 20, because he only has 2-star potential, so he probably won't get drafted this year. He's not even on the list. He's like a future, but yeah, so he's a guy that I think we could tinker with moving around. I think because once Strong's actually a lefty, I'm teaching on the right side too. Strong's like my first round pick because once Strong and Hemstreet get better, they're gonna be my number one combo for sure. And then I have the other really good defensemen, Morgan and Trafford, together. So I have a really nice top four that I like, the two 16-year-olds. And it's going to be the first time I ever keep two 16-year-olds together for their entire careers because I've always had trouble building chemistry on defense because I don't keep pairing together. It's really hard to get like two 16-year-olds on the ice. So usually what happens, you draft like a good defenseman the first or second round, and he kind of sneaks on the third pairing, but then he doesn't have a partner that he plays with. He plays with the older guys and builds a little chemistry with them, and then they leave. So by the time like that happened with Lundy and those guys, and by the time they're really good 18-year-olds, they don't have any chemistry with the guys their age. So I'm really excited to actually keep Strong and the first and third round pick, my top two picks of the draft. I didn't have a second. Him and Hemstreet together for like 4 straight years, and I taught them both the opposite sides at the same time. So now Hemstreet picked up a little quicker. He's pretty smart. So him and Strong are going to be a pairing for a long time, and then I'm excited about that. So yeah, we'll have Morgan and Trafford together, and I think maybe when Morgan moves on, I think he can probably play an OA season 2 actually. So he has like 2 more years left after this, which is sick. So we'll actually have the same top 4D, I guess, for the next 3 years. Most likely it'll be Trafford, Morgan together, and then the two 16-year-olds together for the next bunch of years. And then we also have a trade for this guy, LaRose, I'll talk about in a second. That was the big trade we made. He's another guy that's going to be really good. He's 6'4" with a really good defense. So he'll be a perfect third pairing guy for a couple years without a lot of offense. And then we also have this guy, kind of like, he's not that good, but he just, he's another guy that kind of has gone up quite a bit. He was like 150 pounds when I drafted him, and he's gotten pretty decent. So there's not a lot to talk about this roster. Pretty much we're really rebuilding. We traded all our top guys. So we traded, I'll show you the trade, the huge trade for LaRose. This trade was massive. So I gave him 3 really good older players. I gave him my really good 19-year-old goalie because they didn't have like a good backup goalie, and they were really going for it this year. And Ritson was having a huge year as a 19-year-old, like a 900 save percentage on a really shitty team. So I traded him Ritson, who would be, sorry, I lost where it was there. LaRose, yeah, that's it. So I traded him Ritson, and then the big thing was Wolf. He was the main piece of trade, and Apreda. So Wolf is a monster. They had no one above a 6 rated on defense after the first pairing. So Wolf was absolutely necessary for them. He was a really good 19-year-old that has 3 OHL titles. He's insane. So he's a guy, again, that didn't really dress, so it's not showing it up here. But he was on the team for the last 3 years as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, and an 18-year-old. He always was like the 7th and didn't play a lot because he was late developing, but always had big-time potential with 6'4" frame and pretty good potential, 3.5-star rating or something for. And he has crazy ratings now as a 19-year-old, so he's really going to be good this year. And he actually can play an OA season next year, so that's why I didn't really want to trade him, but I figured it'd be bad next year too, so it wasn't a big deal. I just needed to get second-round, third-round picks and stuff, so I got Wolf. Was the key piece in that trade. And then also we gave up Apreda. They were really short on center, so it was the perfect trade for them. They got a really good D when they were there, and they got a really good center. Sarnia, I'll show you the rest record in a second. So I tossed Apreda in there, who was like one of the best players in the league. He had 51 points in 40 games on a really shitty team. and he has 3 OHL titles to his name, and he's a starter for all 3 on the 4th line. And then he jumped all the way up to a first-line player this year and showed it. He always had the offense. We were just so loaded. He would have been like a second first-liner for multiple years in other teams, but I was so loaded. He was like the perfect 4th-line center because he was a grinder that was really good at defense and face-offs and had good size and was really tough and aggressive. So he was a perfect player for 4th-liner for a dominant team. Even though he's like a second liner in most teams. So now he gets the opportunity to go Sarnia. And I made that trade because I've made a bunch of trades with them in the past. They're kind of like my trading partner in the West. I traded them my really good 6'5", 19-year-old center of the year. I was doing a mini rebuild right before all those Memorial titles. It was actually, looking back, the trade I made with them, Wall, the 6'5" center that was 19 was one of the best centers in the league. And then they had him and they won the title that year. And then the 2nd and 3rd round picks I got from that trade, probably, funny enough, ended up being my Wolf I just traded to them because he was a 2nd round pick. I think that was probably that 2nd round pick, and then also the 3rd round pick, which potentially could have been a Preda. I think a Preda was a 3rd round pick. So funny enough, that could have actually been their original picks. I don't know for sure. There's no way of telling. It doesn't say the exact pick because I had like 3 thirds that year, but there's a good chance it was those guys. And funny enough, I'm trading them back to them for their run because they're 27-9. And if you look at their team, they were missing. They had a 14 and 13, and then like all 5s and 6s after that. I just made the trade, so it's still not showing the guys there. I'd trade for that LaRose guy who's like a 6 rated. And then if you look, they were really missing that. They have a 6 overall center on a really good team, but all their other forwards are double digits. And so I traded them a Preda, who's probably going to be like their first line center, a 15 rated, and then I'll make all 4 centers really good. And then they'll have that really good D. So that was a perfect trade, I thought, for them. And then they're obviously really all in this year. They have a really good team. So Preda's like their best player now. But yeah, they have a really good winger, captain on defense. They had a couple of really good wingers. So a Preda playing in between those 2 guys will be huge. They have the superstar 17-year-old right D, who was like the 2nd or 3rd pick of the draft last year. So they have all the tools they need, and they have a good goalie. So they're really set. They had... They have this great... Oh, he actually hasn't signed... Oh, did they sign him? They must have just signed him like 2 days ago. January 12th. Yeah, so they signed this goalie who's insane. He was the 6th pick of the... Wait, 6th pick of the import, and it was the NHL pick. I was thinking about trading for this guy, but I figured he'd be too valuable to trade for. I'd rather have those 2nd round picks. So that's crazy. I was wondering if they were going to sign him. So that's nuts. They have him now. They're going to be insane. So I think they have a good shot at the title. I was considering trading them Maynard, my best piece to trade, which I made a trade for in a second, I'll show you. But I just didn't think they had the assets. Because if I threw Maynard in there, I would have needed another couple seconds. And I didn't want to absolutely dry them in the future. Because I looked and their entire team is insanely old this year. They have like absolutely nothing after this year other than the goalie. And then that right D will probably be in the NHL. So they'll be like absolutely terrible after this year. And they'll lose everything. Look at all the 19-year-olds they have. That's like the best collection of 19-year-olds I've ever seen, other than my team that last year. But so yeah, they're going to be a major rebuild mode, and I didn't want to steal all their picks during those rebuild modes because I was going to need like 2 or 3 more seconds. And yeah, I just didn't think they'd want to have all those terrible teams. They had like top 5 picks and then not have the 2nd and 3rd rounders. So I didn't think that was really fair to like void them of their entire future. I thought it'd be better to give them the lower. Oh, and I gave them Baldoni, so they have Baldoni too. So Baldoni again was their 12-rated right D, so he can fit in that 2nd line. So then I can keep Baldoni and Wolf together. I forgot about that. So I actually made that in a separate trade. And then, because I couldn't fit it all in that same trade, so I gave up Baldoni, and then I got a 3rd round pick. I just threw this guy in, but released him or whatever. But he was really bad, so I got a 3rd round pick for Baldoni, who's one of the best 08 defensemen in the league. So I figured 1 3rd round pick would probably be fair. I probably could have got a bit more, but I just thought that was like enough assets for everything I got. So I got a 2nd and 2 thirds, I think, and then I got that good young lefty. So that was a huge trade to Sarnia, and then the other huge trade I made was Ottawa. Ottawa is loaded. They have 20, a 17, and a 20 on the first line. So the 20 was an import left winger who was like the 3rd pick of the import draft. Absolute superstar. So he's like 18 or 19 now. And then they have Ryder, who's like the 2nd or 3rd pick of the OHL draft. And he's a 20 rated. Ryder's nuts. He was like a 6'3", 210-pound, 2nd overall pick, and just developed like crazy. So they have those superstars, and then they have Kidler, who actually passed on the draft. I could have picked him. He was the best rated forward in my draft, but I went with the D instead. I picked that right D, who I ended up trading to Guelph, who's really good. And I passed on Kidler, and that was probably a mistake. He turned out to be absolutely insane. He's like a superstar, best center in the league at 18 years old, so he'll be the best player in the league next year at 19 for sure. He's a freak. 17 rated sniper, perimeter shooter, and crazy all across the board. Is the best shot accuracy I've seen in a while. 19, which is crazy. So he's a freak. So, anyways, they got him. And then they also got the second best player in the draft this year at 14th overall somehow. So this guy fell like 14th, but holy smokes, he was good. He's 5'8", 175 center with 15 face-off. Crazy shot accuracy, crazy all across the board. Just needs to get tad more skating, but he already has improved a ton. He was all like 9s in this last year or whatever before the draft. So he's a guy that should probably be like a top 10 pick next year in the NHL draft. Well, maybe not that high. He's pretty freaking good though. So yeah, he's dominating. He's like a point a game as a rookie on a dominant 30-8 team. So they're loaded. So I figured, and they have 16 defense. So I figured Maynard would be good on this team because their second line wingers were like 10 and 12, and they don't really have like a third line center at all. Well, I traded for them like the 7th rated guy. So I gave them the big piece was Fournier, the overager. So I figured he'd like fit perfectly as a third liner. They didn't have any good OAs. And so Fournier is really good, so he's gonna be sick on that team. He's gonna be a huge point producer. He's gonna be like a 14 rated center on like a, and then they're gonna have also my trade on my best player Maynard. So Maynard is a center and winger. He's like completely got experience at both positions. So I figure they'll probably slot him in as a second line right winger, which is crazy because then he's like one of the best wingers in the league. So Maynard, or they might just keep him at center. I don't know, but he is insane. He's a 3-year player for me that had 3 OHL titles. He has a Memorial Cup, and he has an under 18 gold and a gold for the under 17s, and he has a bronze in the Holinka. So he's a guy that has crazy experience. He's always been one of the better players in his draft class. He's an NHL draft pick, so he was the absolute superstar, probably the best player on the trade market this year, and he was my best player by a mile as a 19-year-old. So he was my only good 19-year-old, him and Wolf. So I figured he's way too good, obviously, to be back as an overager next year. So he's a half-season rental. So I gave him those 2 really good centers. I feel like they're going to be insane now. Because if you look at all the star ratings down the middle, you got the 5-star, and then you got the 4 really good centers now. So then Fournier could actually maybe be like a 4th line center, this rookie they have. But yeah, they're going to be nuts. I think they're going to probably put Maynard right wing there because they just have their one really good right winger. We'll see what they do with them. It doesn't matter. But they're going to be crazy. And I figured Ottawa's beat me a couple times, so I didn't really want to make the trade to them because I was kind of pissed. But it just made too much sense because they had a good center I traded for. Traded for a guy who's actually going to be like my first line. So I didn't even talk about the return. So I got the insane return, second, third, and a third. And I gave up those Maynard, the superstar, and the good OA. So I got a good 17-year-old, a couple seconds, a couple thirds, and then completely restocks my second round pick for the next couple seasons. So if you look at my trade stuff here, I have completely restocked my. I actually didn't trade for any this year because I wanted to kind of stockpile them all for the next 2 years because this is going to be the juiciest of the draft classes is next year's, and where I'm probably the worst team because it'll just be this really. I trade my good players and I have everybody back, and so it'll be a really high pick next year, I think. And so we'll have a first, second, third. So that'll be nuts. I'm even going to try to trade for a couple more 4ths and 6s and just do the exact same thing I did last time where you just build the entire team around that like one draft class. But then the crazy thing is I started to collect a ton of assets for the following year also because that was a mistake I made last time is I didn't have a ton of assets after I had that crazy draft class, so I couldn't really trade for supplements because what I realized I want to do is the same thing I did last time where I trade for another star like I trade for Parrish and McDonald, the 2 other first round picks from that draft class. After the fact, I gave up like my best players and trade for them. So I want to do the same thing. I want to trade like my best 17-year-old guys now, like Strong, the defenseman, and those guys in a couple years after. So I'll draft this draft class next year. Not this draft, but the following one. Get a ton of second round picks, get a ton of like really good players. And then I'll trade like this year's second and third, the year after's, and like some good 18, 19-year-old players for like a rookie first round pick. That is really good. And then I'll like do the same thing how I got like McDonald and Peterson together, 2 first round picks for like 3 or 4 years. So that's the plan. I think is pretty much just do the same thing I did before. It was like long story short, but I think I'm just gonna do it even more. So I'm gonna try and get even more assets in the future from all these guys that are 17 now, and they're all 19. Actually, get pretty good. Like some of the top guys, I'll probably be able to flip them. Like I can probably flip next year for like a second or maybe like a couple third round picks or something, and still be a really good 19-year-old who will also be a really good OA the following season. So I might kind of hold on to him, but guy like him or Razor, I think they don't look great now, but by the time they're finished, like in the 19-year-old years, and they're pretty decent, like 12, 13 rated guys, you can kind of flip them for like third round pick type guys and supplement the draft class. I think Morgan will be a really good guy to trade. He'll be really good. He's like an 11 rated rushing defenseman already. So by the time he's 19 or 20, he'll be like really good. So, and Strong will have the most value. He's like the 5-star potential almost. He actually dropped down to 4.5, but he's a guy that is going to be insane in a couple of years. So I think that's probably the plan. We'll probably just kind of roll with a shitty team, get like a top 5 pick, get a top 5 import pick, hopefully, and then roll with the exact team next year. Like literally, we have everybody back. Seymour will be our 08 goalie. He'll be really good. He's actually pretty sick. He's having a nice year. And then yeah, all these guys will just get a year. They don't look good now, but they'll all get progression for a year, another training camp, some big progression, a lot of minutes and stuff to prove themselves and get some value. And then yeah, we'll flip them in a year or two for some big pieces. And yeah, I'll hold on to most of them. Not a lot of them have much trade value. This is the guy we got from Ottawa, by the way. So we got this good center who's going to be like our second line center for the next year or two. It doesn't look very good, but our team's pretty bad. And but yeah, he was a solid 17-year-old to get back, and then we got a bunch of seconds. So I think that's going to be the plan. We're just going to go through the rest of this year really fast here. Hopefully get a top 10 pick. And yeah, start the major rebuild. And now that we have all the assets, we pretty much got all the assets we needed from those couple OA guys. So we traded the 4 really good players. We traded 5 really good players. All 3 OAs, Baldoni and then the 2 centers. And then we traded Maynard and Wolf, the 2 really good 19-year-olds. So gave up a ton of talent, our 5 best players. But we got about 3 or 4 second-round picks, 3 or 4 third-round picks, and started to really shape our future. So yeah, that's pretty exciting if you look at that, having all those second-round picks. That's that's 6, 7 picks in the first 3 rounds. So yeah, I'll make one more trade, probably get another third and another fourth or something. Because I think that's exactly what we did last time. We had the 4 seconds and the 4 thirds, and then we had 2 fours, 2 fifths, 2 sixes, and maybe even 2 sevens. So we had a ton of extra picks. So I can do the same thing. I could even trade this year's third and fourth. Actually, no, this year I'll keep them. That was the one other mistake we made. I learned my lesson from doing it, how we had all the really dominant 19-year-olds. The mistake I made was I didn't have enough good OAs from the class before, which will be this draft class, because I was like, oh, I don't need any of these draft picks because I'm going to have like 20 19-year-olds from this draft class, so I won't start any of these guys ever, really. So I just kept like the first and the third or first and the second because I was like, well, that'll be the 2 16-year-olds I have to start for my rule or whatever, and then just hold on to them. That ended up being like Beaver and someone else, and they ended up being insane players that were so good, and then we had all the guys a year younger than that really good. But I didn't have any good OA guys because Beaver was too good to be an OA, and then I like literally didn't have a pick till the 5th round. So I had like 5 guys in this whole draft class, and I didn't end up having any good OA guys from this year or the year before. So the mistake I made was that I just didn't have enough depth from the draft classes before that. So I won't make that same mistake again. I'll make sure I pick a bunch of guys that are like 3-star potential in like the 3rd and 4th rounds and stuff, and then there'll be guys that I'll plan to have as OAs way in the future when they'll be a year older than all the really good guys that we take with the HL potential. So that'll be hopefully a mistake I'll fix, and then probably find a couple other things. But the other mistake was I just didn't have enough assets the following years after those draft classes to make big trades and throw on second and third rounders to kind of bring in more pieces. So I'm going to try to do that too. I'm going to try to flip a lot of these guys for second, third, and fourth round picks the year after that. Try to have a ton of assets and just do another like 3-year run. So anyways, that's the plan. That's this episode. It's gotten a little longer than I meant to, 30 minutes, but it was a little bit of fun. And yeah, I'll just right before you go, I'll just show you the stats here. And as you can see, Little's my leading scorer now. I traded my like top 3 leading scorers. That's why those stats look pretty low. But yeah, that's the episode. I'll show you one more guy. I like this Barrie guy a lot, by the way. I think this guy's gonna be really good.